Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, President Trump and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden facing off on the debate stage in Cleveland. What were the biggest moments, and did either candidate move the needle? Fox News Radio's national correspondent Jared Halpern and Fox News Radio's political analyst Josh Kraushaar recap the first presidential debate with Kyle Kondik, managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Democrats and Republicans have been divided over the size and scope of a new coronavirus stimulus package. Mark Zandi, chief economist for Moody's Analytics, discusses the nation's economic recovery and how much relief he thinks is needed to help Americans cope amid the pandemic. Plus commentary by Fox News contributor and Fox Nation host Rachel Campos-Duffy. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Greg Jarrett.
I'm Shannon Bream.
I'm Steve Ducey, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, September 30th, 2020. I'm Jared Halpern. President Trump and Joe Biden finally face off in a fiery first debate. So did it change any voters' minds?
I don't necessarily know if a lot of minds were changed, but it seemed like the reaction of Biden was a little more positive than that of Trump.
I'm Dave Anthony. Since the economy was an issue in the debate, we will go in depth.
The recession's over. It was short, 2 months, March, April, very severe, obviously. We lost 22 million jobs in that period. And so the economy is recovering, but slow going.
And there's one thing economist Mark Zandi tells us for October that could really help or hurt the president.
And I'm Rachel Campos-Duffy. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Insults and interruptions overshadowed much of the first debate between President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace moderated the 90-minute session, a job that at times took on the role of referee.
You know what? You're
not true.
You're doing it.
You're going to have
true.
Gentlemen, I hate to raise my voice, but it seems to be, why should I be different than the two of you?
Biden told President Trump to shut up.
You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown.
The president questioned Biden's intelligence.
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
The debate did feature questions that are top of mind for voters: the economy and the coronavirus, race relations, and violence in city streets, and whether both candidates are prepared to accept the results of the November 3rd election.
In terms of whether or not when the votes are counted, and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted.
I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what,
does that mean,
from a common sense,
does that mean you're going to tell your people to take to the street?
It means you have a fraudulent election.
But were any minds changed? Did swing voters and undecideds find a clarifying message in all of it?
I think it's important to remember that there aren't that many undecided voters.
Fox News Radio political analyst Josh Kraushaar and I discussed that and where these campaigns go next with Kyle Kondik, the editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics.
Some of the polling we saw before the debate suggested, I think CBS YouGov suggested that only 6% of those who were actually planning to watch the debate said they were watching because they hadn't made up their mind and were looking for some more information. There was some other polling suggesting that the percentage of people who said that the debate was going to make a difference in their vote was lower than in both 2012 and 2016. So, obviously it was an explosive and potentially unprecedented kind of debate. But I think it's worth keeping in context that in this particular election, there aren't that many undecided folks. I saw some details from Frank Luntz does his focus groups, and it seemed like, from what I could tell from what was coming out of those focus groups, that I don't necessarily know if a lot of minds were changed, but it seemed like the reaction of Biden was a little more positive than that of Trump. There was a snap poll from YouGov of debate watchers. I think 48% said Biden won. 41% said Trump won, which is basically the size of Biden's national lead right now. A lot of people who tune into these things just sort of tune in to cheer for their respective side. So, it's a long way of saying that it's hard to know how folks might react to it. But one other point is that if part of Trump's problem is that people view his presidency as being kind of exhausting and chaotic, instigating this chaotic and exhausting debate probably doesn't help him with that problem.
Let's talk about the tenor and tone of this debate, because I think, to your point, that is going to overwhelm some of the substance and the policy answers in this debate. And I'm just curious, as somebody who watches a lot of debates, and I know you watch not just presidential debates, but Senate debates and House races and everything. Was this different than what we have seen this election cycle in other races?
There's this guy running in Maine named Max Lynn, who is like a conservative alternative in the Senate race, who's been pretty outrageous, but I don't know if it necessarily compares to this. I personally thought that this was maybe I've just time has sort of dulled the memories of it, but I really thought that this was kind of like a more crazy, out of control debate than any of the three from 2016. And I think the reaction to it also suggested that a lot of the kind of the commentators sort of felt that way. But again, maybe we've just sort of lost track of what happened in 2016. But, clearly the president wanted to kind of get inside Biden's head, sort of force Biden to make some sort of big mistake, because the whole, I think the Trump campaign's messaging has basically been that, hey, Biden is so old and clueless that he's not up to running the country. And I think the idea was maybe to force Biden into some sort of mistake by constantly interrupting him. But I don't think Biden made any sort of huge mistake. I don't necessarily think that Biden was particularly sharp. I think he was much better the last time we saw him in a one-on-one debate, which was against Bernie Sanders back in March. But I thought Biden was basically fine. And if the idea was for Trump to force him into some sort of huge error, I don't necessarily think that he did.
Hey, Kyle, it's Josh, and you've written the book literally on Ohio and its politics. And Ohio was a fascinating state in 2016 because you had some remarkable swings from President Obama to President Trump from 2012 to 2016. Those swing voters in Youngstown and in Cincinnati and in Toledo and in those blue collar parts of the state, what do you think how they would react when they see just a feisty, aggressive, just food fight of a debate like we saw tonight? Do you think that those blue collar voters go in a certain direction when it comes to a debate like this?
I mean, look, I think Trump still has some appeal to a lot of blue collar voters in the sense that he is kind of an outrageous character who kind of is extremely politically incorrect, and I think that they like the enemies that the president has, and I don't think anything really changed from that tonight. The one thing I can't say about Ohio, and I think this is true in other states across the country, is that Trump actually did fine in the suburbs. He actually did slightly better than Mitt Romney did in Ohio, and then he really cleaned up in kind of small town rural areas. But from the best that I can tell from sources on both parties, that the president's numbers in the suburbs are way worse than they were in 2016 in Ohio. And again, it's probably true in other places. And if those are voters who are kind of turned off by Trump maybe not being presidential, or again there being this sort of all this chaos around his administration and not being serious enough in a very serious time, that's when I think maybe the president's behavior tonight doesn't really help him. And you also got to remember that Biden came into this debate leading, so Trump's the one who needs things to change after it, and I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know if they will.
I want to ask both of you this question, and we'll start with you, Kyle, and then Josh, jump in. What is the moment or a couple of moments that are really going to resonate, really going to stick with this debate?
The whole thing is kind of a blur to me. I mean, Biden did tell the president to shut up, which I think maybe stands out.
I'm not going to answer the question because the question is
Justice, radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
And also, there's been a lot of discussion about the president kind of refusing to condemn, white supremacists, which has been a theme of his presidency.
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
And so that's something that again came up in a lot of the post-debate conversation.
Josh?
Yeah, I think the quote from Joe Biden, "Will you shut up, man?" That is going to be the soundbite of the debate, and it's a Rorschach test of where the country is. I think there are a lot of Democrats and certainly Biden supporters who think that, boy, he really showed the president after he's interrupting and he's attacking so aggressively. But I think a lot of Republicans would look at that and see that as a low blow from the Democrat and sort of a whataboutism of sorts that you hear so often in politics these days. So I mean, I just think that was sort of the seminal moment early in the debate that just showed how off the rails this whole debate ended up becoming.
I want to finish with this because this is with the caveat that following the debate in a press call, the Biden campaign said that the VP will be participating in the next two debates. The next debate is a town hall style debate. Kyle, what do you expect over the next two debates between President Trump and former Vice President Biden?
I mean, it's certainly going to be an interesting format at the town hall. It often is. And I think the president is going to have to really tone it down because he can't. It's one thing to be going after a moderator. It's another thing to be going after actual people asking him questions. So it may just be that the format of the next debate, because it's a town hall, will sort of kind of naturally tone things down a little bit.
Josh?
Yeah, and I think that number one, it's interesting that Joe Biden is definitely doing the next two debates. That there was a little bit of a question, perhaps, among some analysts that maybe he would want to back out given the way this debate transpired. But no, I think that Kyle is absolutely right that the town hall format is a much different dynamic, and you don't want to be quite as aggressive. You don't want to be quite as critical when you're trying to talk to voters and showing empathy and showing that you can connect with the average questioner. So I think that style is going to be a whole lot different and may lead to a different result.
Of course, the wild card in all of this is as these debates are happening and in this time in between debate, Kyle, an awful lot of folks are going to be filing and casting their ballots.
Yeah, I mean, according to Michael McDonald, who really tracks a lot of the early voting trends, I think he added up to 1.3 million people have voted. Now, granted, if you expect maybe 140 to 150 million people, maybe actually more than that, who end up voting, it's a small number, but the number is going to keep growing. A lot of people are going to be voting by mail and voting early in person. It seems like many more Democrats are going to be voting that way, whereas Republicans are holding back to Election Day, I think in part because how the president has talked about it. But, again, the clock's ticking. We've known the president's been behind for a while here. There have been times where certain moments in the campaign where I think he's been hoping to catch up. I think his position's probably a little bit better than it was in June and July, but he's still behind. And, we'll wait and see if anything changes after this debate. Although the way the campaign has gone so far, it's been, a crazy, chaotic year in campaign. But the numbers don't change all that much.
Absolutely. It has been a very stable race according to the polls. The next debate is the vice presidential debate. That will be at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. That is next week, and we will all talk to you then.
This is Rachel Campos-Duffy with your Fox News commentary coming up.
It was a key topic in last night's debate, and the one issue that voters in many polls, including the most recent Fox survey, give President Trump the edge over Joe Biden, the economy. And who better can guide us through the coronavirus recovery?
No, the recession's over. It was short, 2 months, March, April, very severe, obviously. We lost 22 million jobs in that period.
Mark Zandi is chief economist for Moody's Analytics.
The economy is recovering, but slow going. We've gotten about half the jobs we lost back, so we're still down about 11 million jobs. And of that 11 million, just for a bit of context, 6 million or so are folks that say they're on temporary layoff, that they've been furloughed, they'll get back to work hopefully soon. The other remaining 5 million, however, are on permanent layoffs, so it's going to take a good bit of time to get those folks back to work. So this is slow going. It's a slog, but at least we're recovering.
Yeah, now we get another jobs report on Friday. What are you expecting?
I expect another gain of about 700,000 jobs, many of them coming in those industries that continue to slowly reopen: restaurants, leisure, hospitality, transportation, the healthcare sector. That's where we'll get the bulk of the jobs. So, that's a good gain, but obviously slowing. If you go back in June, we had a gain of nearly 5 million jobs, and we've been throttling back ever since. And we're getting pretty close to the point where we're not going to be able to get many more jobs back in those industries that got hit hard. So it's going to be, I think, much tougher to get those job gains going forward, particularly if Congress and administration can't figure out a way to provide more help to the economy. Then I think that's going to be more of a headwind for jobs.
And the unemployment rate is what, still in the 8% range maybe?
Yeah, it was 8.4% in August. I don't expect that to change all that much, but I do expect the labor force to pick up as well. The other thing that's happened here is that you've had millions of people step out of the workforce altogether. They stop looking for work, and when you stop looking for work, even if you want a job, you're not counted as unemployed. So I expect some of those folks to start coming back in looking for work, and that'll add to the unemployment. So net, I don't expect much of a change in the unemployment rate.
Now, you mentioned the recession is over. How did we determine it was just March and April?
Yeah, recession is a broad-based, persistent decline in economic activity. That's the definition. It's a matter of judgment as to when a recession begins and ends. But, we lost millions, tens of millions of jobs in March and April, and then we got lots of those jobs back in May and June when businesses reopened. And so we went from, big declines, persistent, broad-based declines in economic activity. That's a recession. To growth. Of course, having said that, the script is still being written here. We're still in the pandemic. Things could go off the rails, and so we could start backtracking again. And if that's the case, then I'll be wrong. The recession didn't end in April. It'll be a much longer recession.
Right, and we have the one big report that I've heard the president talk about. It's going to come out not too far before the election. Is that report on economic growth, GDP, for the third quarter? So, what do you think that we are going to see?
Well, it'll be a big gain. I mean, we obviously had a huge loss in the second quarter when businesses shut down and the pandemic first hit, and everyone was very nervous and was self-quarantining. So the economy was down, I think it was just over 30% at an annualized rate. So we're going to get a big bounce back in Q2, and that reflects all those business reopenings at the beginning of the quarter. And so it'll be up, 25, 30%. But, since June, early July, the economy has kind of gone sideways here. It's growing, but barely. So we'll get a big number for Q3, but that belies the kind of flatlining in growth we've experienced since.
There are some things that are hard to gauge. I mean, you're an economist, so you deal with all these. There's so many layers to the economy, different numbers and measures. Like, for instance, we have a housing boom going on. Sales going through the roof. We have low mortgage rates. We have consumer confidence that came out for September, better than August by far, better than economists like you had expected. The stock market has recovered a lot of the losses over the summer that it had in the springtime. So I know there's a lot of bankruptcies and small businesses that have closed forever, but then you have this side. So how do you put it all together?
Yeah, there's a lot of crosscurrents. In particular, this economy, you've got some real winners and you've got some real losers. You mentioned a couple of the winners. Housing is the one part of the economy that has surprised me the most. With record low mortgage rates below 3%, with the fact that we came into this pandemic with a shortage of affordable housing, and then this shift in preferences. People now want to live in single-family homes more removed from big urban centers. All that's kind of come together and caused the housing market to boom. But on the other side of the real estate market, the commercial real estate market is really struggling. Absorption is way down for all kinds of space, retail, hotels, office space, and prices are down as well. Transactions are down. So it really depends on which part of the economic elephant you touch. You can get a very different picture. But bottom line, if you kind of put it all together and net out all the crosscurrents, it's an economy that's growing but struggling to grow.
You saw that Yelp report that came out. It was like March through April, something like 72,000 small businesses closed permanently.
The pandemic has really done real damage to mom and pop retailers, smaller businesses in the accommodation, leisure industry, recreational industries, transportation, healthcare, and so it's really been hard on small business. And that goes back to the point about which part of the elephant you touch. I mean, if you look at large companies, particularly the bigger multinational companies, they're doing fine, no problem. Those are companies that are benefiting from the failures that are occurring at smaller businesses, and the small businesses are really, really struggling. So,
right, and you have retailers that have had a lot of retail bankruptcies. Certainly department stores, clothing stores took it on the chin, but then you have Target and Walmart that did fine because they were open the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So the big guys are benefiting from the pain and suffering of the small guys, are taking market share. And retail is the best example of that, but that dynamic is playing out in lots of other industries. And by the way, Dave, that's one reason why the stock market is doing so well, because the companies that are the winners, the big guys, they're the publicly traded companies that are in the equity market.
There's one thing in this economic recovery Republicans and Democrats agree on.
The Federal Reserve Chairman has said very, very clearly that we need an additional stimulus package.
10,000 small businesses out there that are talking about 36% could shut down if they don't get extended money.
That is House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. You heard Congressman John Garamendi, a Democrat, first. Both sides blame each other for the impasse that dates back to May, when the House passed a bill to provide another $3+ trillion in corona financial aid. Senate Republicans said that was way too much. Now, there have been attempts to compromise. The new House proposal unveiled this week is $2.2 trillion. Republicans want nearly $1 trillion less. And Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin have been talking the past few days, trying to work something out. What does economist Mark Zandi think we need?
If I were king for the day, I'd go big, because the pandemic is still on. There's a lot of uncertainty. The economy's still struggling. We want to get to the other side of this and get back to full employment as fast as possible. Interest rates are at zero, so if you were going to borrow money to finance something, you would do it now. So I would go big. So, the president has been talking about a $1.5 trillion package. That's what I would go for, something like that. Some money for additional unemployment insurance, another round of stimulus checks, more money for small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. And I do think state and local governments need help, because if they don't get it, they're going to start cutting jobs and programs, and that's going to be a direct hit to the economy in the not-too-distant future. So
that is such a big political football, though. That particular element, they can't agree on that one, because Republicans keep saying they're not going to bail out bad Democrat-run states and cities.
Yeah, and I'm a little perplexed by that, because the fiscal problems are evident coast to coast. It's not a D problem or an R problem. It's a problem, and these are critical jobs. These are teachers, fire, police, the emergency responders. You need them at any time, but particularly in a crisis like this. So I am perplexed by that argument, but, that's the argument that has kind of won the day so far, and we're not getting that package. So I do think the risks to this fragile recovery are rising, and we could see some real problems towards the end of the year, beginning of next.
All right. Now, we talked to you back in 2019. Seems like forever ago. Pre-pandemic, it's so hard to remember anymore. Yeah. But we talked to you. You have these models that help you try to predict who might win the election based on your different economic models. And at the time, you thought things looked very good for President Trump. How do you think it looks now? Are those models still in play or no?
It's very close, but the results have flipped. As you mentioned, Trump was hands down the winner under typical turnout. Back when we chatted, I guess about a year ago when we first unveiled these models. Now Biden would win, but it's razor thin again under typical turnout. And Pennsylvania is the key swing state, and that's where I live. I was raised here in PA. And we've done, you might find this interesting, we've done a fair amount of work at a county level to identify which counties are most important in each state. And the key county is Chester County. And that, David, that's exactly where I live, Chester County. So I joke that this election probably revolves around my wife, and we need to watch her very carefully.
So in each state that are battleground states, there are how many counties do you think really could the whole election could rest on those results?
Just half a dozen. That's it. I mean, it's just bizarre, isn't it? I mean,
wait, hold on. You're breaking a whole election down to a half dozen counties?
I'm telling you. Yeah, and it's probably not many communities in those counties. So, if you're, in the Trump or Biden campaign, you need to be focused like a laser beam on these, and they are. If you see where the candidates are going, they're going exactly where, the models say they should be going. They're going to, Scranton, Pennsylvania, or, outside of Milwaukee, or, in Michigan. These are the key swing communities that'll determine how this election goes.
The economy in the next month, are we going to get enough information to help the president to make his case or hurt the president in the next month or no?
No, I think this is, the die has been cast here at this point. I mean, the only thing that can kind of throw a wrench into everything is the stock market, right? I mean, the president has shown a laser beam, a light on the equity market. That's his kind of real-time report card. So, if that headed south in a big way or headed north in a big way, that may swing some voters' minds. But, other than that, no. At this point, I think people's minds have largely been made up, and they have a pretty good sense of what their own finances are, and they've connected the dots back to the election. So I think hard to imagine what would swing the election at this point.
Mark Zandi, chief economist, Moody's Analytics, resident of one of the most important counties in America. Thanks very much for joining us.
Anytime, Dave. Thank you so much.
Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Rachel Campbell's Duffy.
What's on your mind?
Feminists have an Amy Coney Barrett problem. For the next 30 days, Amy Coney Barrett, President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court seat left vacant by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, will be the most talked about woman in America. Her life, both professional and personal, will be under a flaw-enhancing magnifier, the kind every woman detests. Every decision Barrett has made will be sliced and diced by political operatives hoping to land a knockout nomination-killing punch. Barrett is unquestionably qualified. She graduated number 1 in her Notre Dame Law School class, eventually winding up as a clerk on the Supreme Court for Judge Antonin Scalia. Students, colleagues, and former professors all agree that she is as brilliant as she is kind, generous, and humble. In short, she has the perfect intellect and temperament for this all-important lifetime appointment. As America gets a front row seat to the life and times of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, a lot of fair-minded women will conclude that her journey looks a lot like feminism to them. Call it conservative feminism if you like, but this feminist rebrand may prove a lot more desirable to everyday American women who harbor more hope for love, marriage, sex, and kids, even lots of them, than woke feminist thought leaders think is possible or even reasonable. But wait, how could a pro-life Catholic mom of 7 become the new face of feminism? And how dare she get married and start a family in her 20s? How provincial to refuse to abide by a socially and environmentally acceptable number of children. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The feminist icon torch was supposed to be passed to Hillary Clinton, but she fell short in 2016. Clearly, Amy Coney Barrett is operating at a higher intellectual and professional level than the vast majority of women. Nonetheless, Her life serves as a model to those of us seeking an alternative to the constraints of feminism. Barrett broke all the rules in the feminist playbook. Fully aware of her exceptional academic and legal talents, she didn't take the predictable, high-powered law firm route. She went back to South Bend, to the Catholic community she knew and loved, to teach and raise babies. She followed her heart, investing early in the things that last: marriage, family, and a deep and active spiritual life. It takes courage and faith to build a full personal life when the world is telling you that you are squandering your talents by dividing your time and energy on diapers, carpools, and the quotidian work of family life. Liberals seem to be slowly, if not begrudgingly, coming to terms with the fact that Amy Coney Barrett is more likely than not to replace their beloved and iconic Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG. Soon, feminists will also have to contend with the fact that ACB will be an icon in her own right, tempering the excesses of feminism and offering women the cultural validation that feminism denied them. She is not a victim of the patriarchy. She is the product of her choices, and she reminds women who want to be mothers that there are miles of space between June Cleaver and Barbara Walters to land on. President Trump should be commended for recognizing the value of including the voice of a mom with young children on the most important court in the land. It sends a powerful message about what our country can and should value: the things that last. This is Rachel Campos Duffy, Fox News contributor and host of Moms on Fox Nation.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. Fox News Radio on demand on the Fox News app. Download the app and just click listen. When you swipe left, you can listen to your favorite Fox News talk shows live. Swipe right for the latest Fox News Radio newscasts on demand. Fox News Radio on the Fox News app. Download it today.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.